we have the founder of Hootsuite here in about 1 minute coming on stage. And for those of you who don't know Hootsuite, which would be extremely surprising, they have over 15 million customers, 79 of the top 100 Fortune 100 companies. Obviously, they're doing some crazy things. Ryan has done, actually, he's kind of changed the landscape for social media through Hootsuite. So he is being interviewed by Hannah Schuler, and she has been with the Financial Times for 7 years, loves social media and security, and those two guys will be entertaining you for the next 22 minutes. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring up, now warm welcome, guys. That means get off your chair and clap and scream and yell. Ryan and Hannah, come on out.
And now hopefully you've captured that all with your spectacles.
I have.
I feel like I can't really launch into a serious conversation about whether startups can have it all without addressing the spectacles issue. And I'm a little bit put off by the...
I'm going to take them off now.
If you can't see quite as closely, when they're recording, they have like a little light going round and round, like it's sucking all the information in. So when are you using your spectacles apart from here to humiliate me?
So first off, I had Google Glass that I used for about 15 minutes. I've tried a whole bunch of different products. I sat on the board of a company that did wearables called Recon in Vancouver. They did snowboard and cycling glasses. They sold to Intel. And then I got these recently, and I use these all the time. It's very simple. I use them when I'm snowboarding, when I'm backcountry skiing. I use them for events like this, just little taps throughout the day, and then it builds a really cool story. So I find them using them a lot. 2-hour battery life, 10-second snaps. You get a lot of snaps out of a charge.
And what are you doing with the pictures? Because I actually saw recently people posting them on Facebook, actually, not on Snapchat, that you can store them somewhere else. Yeah, so
I do that. It's a little bit of a hack. They save automatically to your Snapchat chats, and then you choose to post them or not. Then you can save them to your camera roll, and then you can upload them to other social media. So it's a little bit of a hack, and I do that. I put them on Instagram every so often. You can comment them up. But I'd love it if it was a little more fluid straight into your camera roll.
Well, I don't think Facebook's about to buy Snap this time around. Just my final question, seeing as you did use Google Glass, out of 10, how silly did you feel using Google Glass compared to how silly you feel using spectacles?
Well, I obviously went for a very subtle coral color.
I have seen people wearing them. You are the first person I've seen that chose coral. For people out there, there's black, blue, or coral.
This is the worst selling color.
Yes, I think so. And actually, it's quite similar to the color of my newspaper. The Financial Times is a bit coralesque, so maybe I should. Yeah.
I feel actually less foolish wearing these. I mean, the glass, it was just like made your head go to one side. It was so heavy. And these are, a lot lighter. I think it's really smart that you can see when it's recording. Sometimes people are a little bit, whatever, but it doesn't have the glass hole reputation yet. We'll see. But
they've just gone on mass sale, so we'll see whether suddenly they become either that or just like a teenager's thing.
Right.
We'll see. Right. I'm sure they won't be. I'm sure you'll be fine. So actually, Snap is kind of relevant for our discussion because, scale and profit, can startups have it all? Snap, it may not be heading for quite as high a valuation as it wanted, but it probably is looking at going public with about a $20 billion valuation. It doesn't make any profit. Are startups kind of becoming sort of diverging, and there are these ones which become these not only unicorns but mega unicorns, and don't need to have any profit, and then everyone else is expected by their investors to stay on the straight and narrow and get to profitability quickly?
I think there's a continuum. Right, so there is no right answer here. There is high growth and there's high profitability, and there's a continuum in between. Tamaz from Redpoint has a great piece which I reference all the time. It's the rule of 40, which talks about your combined growth and your growth percentage and your EBITDA margins, and combined they should be kind of 40 plus. Is great for a high growth company. we grew really quickly for a lot of years, didn't focus on profitability per se. We focused more on growth. And in January of last year, I talked to my team, and with Ryan Sweeney, actually, who's on my board, who was up earlier, we talked about where we felt like the markets were going, where we felt like we wanted to go as a company, and we decided to head towards cash flow positive. And so we planted that flag at the beginning of last year with the team as a challenge, and we hit that in Q2 of last year. It was, I think
so
it was...
So you're actually profitable, or
yeah,
you're like EBITDA?
We're cash flow positive, like subtly cash flow positive, and intentionally we want to reinvest our profits back into growth and innovation. So we do that, but we are kind of just feathering that in terms of not banking a lot of money and just reinvesting back in. But we do have the ability to create a great profitable company. We know we can do it. But like a lot of companies that you talk about, I think Salesforce is an example of a company that's never turned a profit per se. They just continue to.
Amazon, it's very rare for them to as well, right? So
yes. Yeah.
There's always the odd surprise quarter where you're like, oh my God, Amazon made money. I understand that. It's interesting though what you said. You said that you started to talk about it last year, and you mentioned that you looked at the markets. I mean, do you think that the uncertainty last year about the sort of future of large tech rounds, which seems to have gone away to some extent, do you think that made a lot of companies stop and think, actually, this is the time to at least get cash flow positive?
Yeah, I believe it did. I think a lot of companies were, uncertain about the future. Are the big rounds going to be there? And you just don't want to be caught out. I mean, for the founders in the audience that are looking to fundraise, you want to raise money because you want to, not because you have to. When you have to go get money, when you have to go to a pawn shop, it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So
are there VCs that you would label the equivalent of pawn shops? Can you say their names?
I won't. I don't think I'm going to go there.
Okay.
But you want to do it because you want to. I mean, Ryan from Qualtrics, who was up here earlier, also. I mean, he built a great company. He took money because he wanted to, and he was much more able to set terms and find the investors he wanted to bring in versus investors he had to bring in.
So when you got to that moment, what changes did you make in how you ran the company?
It was, I think, good across the board discipline. I think people, when you set the MO of the company to be around growth, people will throw money at solving problems, and sometimes in a non-efficient way. When you set the mission for the year to be around getting to profitability, people do think we'd ask people to think about spending like it was their money, and you also, I think, in that year, we had been hyper growing up to that point. We held flat on headcount. We really thought a lot about what was important for us. Do we have the right people at the table? And I think just really assessed as I said, when you're in hyper growth, you're just bringing in and solving things really quickly. I think pretty much every company that goes through hypergrowth has to have a point of reckoning where you reassess your foundations. And so I do think last year was a very foundational year for us. We looked at our systems, looked at our team, looked at all these things. And now we came out, we did a kickoff in January, and I felt so confident that we've got like the right mix in terms of systems and people, et cetera, like just light years beyond where we were last year. And it's a lot of that discipline that made it happen.
Yeah, I was going to say it sounds very reflective, but I like that term, the point of reckoning. And on the overspending, I remember when Dropbox had bought, what did they buy, like a $30,000 Panda?
Yeah, the golden Panda.
Yeah. For their lobby, and they decided they wouldn't sell it. I think partly that might be because no one would buy it, but right. Put that aside in order as like a sign of overspending. Yeah. Were there things that you thought, in retrospect, maybe you'd overspent on?
We don't have a golden Panda, but I think the things that I look back on are just like inefficient spending. Like maybe some of our ad spend, we just were like, acquire users. Were we doing that as efficiently as we could? Probably not. Did we spend a lot of money on it? Yeah. Did we have more team than we needed in some areas of the business? probably. So I don't, I don't think there was anything, super frivolous, but we did kind of just look around and see where we could find things. I brought in a new CFO in Q4 of last year. He's been fantastic. Was at a public company, a really good partner for me. But he managed to find just a ton of savings, kind of dollars in the cushions.
I always have sort of these ideas of just CFOs going around with their checkboards, because like when Ruth Porat came into Google, right? That was from Morgan Stanley. That was a big change in their cost structure. Yeah. Interesting. And you also made an acquisition relatively recently of Adspresso. When you look at companies to acquire, what are you looking for? How do you get the balance of growth and profit in these companies that you want to acquire?
Yeah. So it depends on what you want as a company. Like getting back to the percentage growth versus EBITDA kind of margins, you can kind of buy for either. So if you want to feather in greater growth, higher velocity growth, you look for acquisitions to do that. If you want to feather in, profitability, this company had both, which we of course love. It was more or less cash flow neutral, and it had great growth. It was strategic for us. It's a great product. It's
What does it do?
So it helps brands, primarily small, medium brands, advertise more efficiently on Facebook. So we use it. We love it. And they were just at the point of starting to sell into enterprise. And we have a few hundred enterprise sales team that are really excited about this product, and they're now able to sell that to our customers. So it was kind of the perfect fit. It doesn't happen very often that you get such a nice fit as this. But we do, back to your original question, we look for both, and if you can find both, that's the best. But different companies will buy for different things. We turn down companies that are turning really nice profits because they're not growing, and we just don't want to buy profits for the sake of profits. We want to continue our high growth. As Ryan Smith from Qualtrics said, you have to do both. You have to grow and you have to be profitable.
And the other thing that's kind of unusual about Hootsuite is that you're a B Corp. Do you want to explain what that is? Because I think the only other company that I've heard who've done that is Etsy. I don't know. Who are the others, and why would you do that?
Yeah, so it's a growing movement. I think that B Corp is, so for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it encompasses effectively, from a board perspective, a stakeholder consideration. So not just a shareholder consideration and decisions that get made at the company. So the stakeholders include community, your employees, and the environment, et cetera. It's for us, if you're kind of doing the right things, it's not a huge challenge. They have a certification checklist that you go through, and so I challenge everybody to do it. And it's not extremely expensive to do. It takes a bit of time. It takes somebody to kind of walk through it. It's opened some interesting, business deals for us. But at the end of the day,
really, how has it opened business deals?
Just doing business with companies that are like-minded in their outlook. So we've opened the doors with a few companies, and I think getting back to it. And specifically in Canada, companies have a responsibility to consider stakeholders to a certain extent. If for us, it was fairly easy because tech companies, for the most part, are fairly clean companies. We had a recycling program. We consider, diversity in our workforce, and all these things kind of get considered, and you score, and then come out of it. And if it kind of passes scoring, you become certified. So, anyways, I'll put it out as a challenge for people to look it up and see if it's of interest.
Not just for twee companies like Etsy. There we are.
Yeah, no, there are a lot of small companies that do it as well. 3-person companies can do the certification.
Oh, wow. Okay. And you also make a fair few personal investments. Mm-hmm. What do you look for there when you're trying to get that balance? Actually, that's the other way of saying it. What's a red flag for you when you're looking at personal investments and, people are either going crazy on the growth or really focusing on the profits?
I don't get super wrapped up in that. Like you have to look at what the company is doing. So if the company is setting up to be a great cash cow company and not hyper growth, you have to consider that as an investor and take it for that. Stepping back, I look at the entrepreneur always. It's always about the entrepreneur. I get, from my perspective, when I hear about companies where the founder leaves, I often get kind of nervous about the future of that company, and I want to see that people are passionate about what they're doing and they're leaned in, and that they have a long-term vision and strategy for where they're going. And if you don't have that, if you don't have somebody that's going to be able to carry that vision along for years and have that energy to do that, that's a red flag for me. Profitability versus growth. I think that I probably would lean a little bit more towards profitability versus growth. I do a lot more SaaS investing than I do consumer investing. Consumer investing is very sexy. So many people love chasing it down because they love having a product that their grandma and mom use.
Well, I was about to point to that. Maybe your grandma and mum don't use spectacles yet, but we'll see.
Or their teenage kids. It's a super sexy category. At the end of the day, I understand I get SaaS, and so that's usually where I would kind of orient it towards.
Interesting. And of course, you're based in Vancouver, which is getting a lot of attention for its tech scene at the moment, given that you're much more open to immigration than it looks like Trump's America is going to be. Have you received a lot of inquiries maybe about what it would be like for people to set up their startup in Vancouver?
Mm-hmm. I have. The day that Trump, won the election, I got 10 calls,
wow.
Text calls. I had, and those were individuals looking for opportunities to go work in Canada.
Were they Americans or immigrants?
The combination. Some were Americans, some were expat Canadians. I also had a company that had 50 employees that did a little vote, and they're like, "How's everybody feeling?" And they were really turned off, and they decided they wanted to go relocate to Canada. I don't know if any of that's going to happen. I don't know if it was just an emotional, knee-jerk reaction. But on the other side, and I'll speak to Canada. We have right now probably the most favorable immigration policy for skilled workers, which everybody in technology is considered a skilled worker. We have a 2-week fast-track immigration, so people can be working within 2 weeks if
wow.
they have an accepted job offer. So it's very rapid. It's I think a very business-friendly environment right now, and the startup community in Vancouver, I think, is doing really interesting stuff. There's some cool things going on.
Yeah, I saw you mentioned as one of the maple syrup mafia. Is that an official term?
That's something I coined a few years ago. Maple syrup mafia. I mean, obviously Canadians are all about maple syrup. It was kind of. So when I was fundraising, Hootsuite's now 8 years old. It was a difficult time to fundraise in Canada. There was kind of one angel investor in Vancouver. It was like the sheriff in a one-horse town, and you go to talk to the guy, and he either like it or not. He actually missed on Hootsuite, by the way. Every time I see him, he's like, "Yeah, I really should have done that." But now I'm an LP in his fund now. But so at that point, I was kind of saying that you guys have probably heard of the PayPal mafia. My point being that Canada, Vancouver needs a maple syrup mafia. We need a group of alumni that get have a great exit and outcome that go on to do other startups. And I think that we're starting to see more and more. There's been a number of great exits this year. A lot of those people are investing back in, and we're starting to see some really interesting action.
So you're saying now there's the ingredients you have are the immigration, you're getting more capital. What else is there that sort of needs to come along for Vancouver to compete with somewhere like Silicon Valley?
Great entrepreneurs.
Yeah. You guys.
Yeah. You need entrepreneurs, you need talent to make it happen, and you need capital. And the talent to make it happen, two-part, you need to immigrate and educate. And I've been talking a lot with secondary education institutions about how we can get more talented engineers coming out. We cannot oversupply engineering talent globally. There's a huge appetite for talented engineers. And so I believe we're going to start to see a lot more graduates, a lot more passion put around graduating people in STEM.
And it's not just startups either, is it, in Vancouver? There are lots of large companies based down there expanding here.
Yeah, Microsoft just put in a $110 million office in downtown Vancouver. There are a number of other offices, other larger companies that are building out presences. Salesforce has one, Amazon has a presence, and the list kind of goes on.
Wow, okay. So is it even hard to recruit now?
We have a pretty nice employer brand, I think. We've got, we're working on some stuff from an engineering perspective that is pretty cool. We send 5 million messages a day to our social network partners. We have a few hundred Amazon instance cluster. There's a lot of cool engineering things that we're doing. So that combined with a great culture and offices, and I think in general we have a pretty nice package for people. It is a tight market. It's a tight market everywhere for great engineering talent, great technology talent, great marketers, great salespeople. So, but we fight for that and invest in it a lot.
Well, good luck. Thank you so much for joining me
Thank you so much.
showing off your spectacles.
All right. Thanks, guys.